The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a scorched graveyard of glassed sand and fractured metal. Heat shimmered in waves, distorting the horizon into a quivering mirage. The air was dry enough to bleed moisture from lungs, and silence reigned. Unnatural, absolute. At the edge of a collapsed comms relay, half buried in sand, a figure lay still beneath a mesh of torn camouflage netting. Dust clung to his suit, fine and red like dried blood. Through the cracked visor of his helmet, his eye remained fixed to the scope of a bolt-action rifle, the barrel barely poking out from beneath a slab of concrete. Sergeant Rook breathed once, then not again for a long time. 200 meters ahead, a group of Dominion scouts disembarked from a glossy black drop pod, its surface humming with residual energy. They moved with careless grace, tall and confident in reflective armor that shimmered faintly under the sun. Their heads turned slowly, scanning the derelict battlefield with a sense of amusement, not caution. One of them knelt beside a rusted human machine gun, poking at it with disdain, laughing in a voice that filtered through Rook's earpiece as a cold, metallic echo. "So this is Earth's might?" The voice translated, smooth and clinical. "Rusted iron. Friction-driven tools. Their weapons belong in museums." Another scout picked up a cracked rifle stock, still bearing a faded U.S. flag decal. He lifted it above his head and jeered, broadcasting the image back to orbit. The Dominion's communication drone hovered silently overhead, documenting the scene for higher command. Rook knew that feed was being relayed live across Dominion vessels, meant as humiliation, not reconnaissance. His finger rested on the trigger, unmoving. He hadn't been sent here to defend a base. There was no base left to defend. The orbital strike had leveled everything weeks ago. The outpost, the bunkers, the anti-air guns, all flattened in the Dominion's initial demonstration. No full-scale invasion, just a warning, a show of superiority. They hadn't even considered humans a threat. But Earth wasn't interested in fighting on their terms. Rook adjusted the scope by half a click. Wind was negligible. The scouts weren't wearing helmets, only thin masks. A gesture of confidence. His rifle, handcrafted and modified by hand in a steel bunker outside Houston, fired one round at a time. No smart optics, no plasma, just cold precision. He steadied his breath and exhaled. Then he pulled the trigger. The recoil was minimal. The sound, dulled by a makeshift suppressor of wrapped polymer and scavenged ceramic, barely whispered through the wreckage. But the impact was immediate. The laughing scout's head snapped back in a sudden, jarring motion, a bloom of violet blood spraying upward as he collapsed into the sand. His body spasmed once before going still. Silence devoured the clearing. The remaining scouts froze, momentarily unsure. One knelt beside the fallen alien and pressed 2 fingers to its neck. When he looked up, his eyes were wide behind his visor. Rook couldn't hear what he said, but the tone was unmistakable. Panic. Rook ejected the casing, letting it fall silently beside him, and slid in another round. He didn't move otherwise. The Dominion troops scrambled for cover, ducking behind slabs of collapsed alloy, their previous arrogance replaced by urgent radio chatter. They moved in tight, speaking quickly. Their armor systems activated with soft hums, now glowing with active shielding. The laughter had died. The feed drone still hovered above them, uncertain whether to retreat or continue its broadcast. He watched as they formed a defensive arc around the pod, weapons now drawn, scanning every angle. One of them activated a spherical drone, which lifted off his back and began emitting pulses of light as it searched for thermal signatures. Rook knew better than to panic. His ghillie mesh was lined with cooling threads, a simple low-tech solution Dominion scanners had never been trained to counter. He waited. Another scout moved to high ground, crouching behind a broken pillar, his weapon aimed out toward the southern ridge. Rook noted the position. He remembered its angles, its shadows. Years of fieldwork had taught him the difference between movement and opportunity. He counted their positions, 5 left. Standard scout protocol meant at least one would attempt to flank, while another requested reinforcements. The drop pod was still active, its doors sealed shut behind them. likely on a return countdown. They hadn't even considered the possibility of a sniper. Why would they? He was obsolete. Earth's weapons were mockery to them. But Rook wasn't here to make them understand the weapon. He was here to make them understand the man behind it. He adjusted again, slowly, lining up the scout perched behind the pillar. The wind shifted slightly, pulling west. He accounted for it in his mind, finger brushing the trigger. A single heartbeat passed. He fired. The bullet shattered the edge of the pillar and pierced the scout's visor. The body slumped forward, crumpling over the edge like a broken doll. The drone above began erratic maneuvers, reacting to rapid input. The comms chatter intensified. One of the scouts activated a distress beacon. Rook couldn't allow that to continue. He moved, not with panic or haste, but with the deliberate fluidity of someone who had practiced every inch of crawl space he might ever need. He slid from under the netting and pressed himself against the sand, low and slow, belly scraping rock as he worked his way around the northern flank. The motion was mindless now, reflexive. Even in sweltering heat, his breathing stayed calm. He reached a second firing position behind a broken satellite dish. Elevation improved, line of sight sharp. Through the scope, he found the beacon, a small, glowing device strapped to the scout's forearm, blinking in rhythm. He took the shot without hesitation. The round punched through metal, flesh, and circuitry. The beacon died mid-blink. The scout collapsed, his scream muted in the growing chaos. The final 3 scattered. Not coordinated, frenzied. One tripped over the drop pod's collapsed ramp. Another dove behind a burned-out hoverbike, clutching a scanner and swiping desperately at its controls. The third stood still, weapon trembling his grip as he turned in place, looking for a threat that was never where he expected it. Rook didn't fire again. He let them sit in it, let them marinate in the fear. The rifle's chamber was still loaded, his body cool despite the heat, his heart unhurried. He didn't need to speak, didn't need to announce himself. His silence was the message. And somewhere, far above, in the orbiting Dominion command vessel where 100 officers watched the live feed turn from entertainment into horror, the laughter had stopped as well. Rook closed his eye for a moment, exhaled once more, and smiled without warmth. They had come to mock Earth. Now they bled on its soil. The desert wind picked up as the sun began its slow crawl toward the horizon, painting long shadows across the jagged rocks. Rook's world had narrowed into cold calculation. Every grain of sand, every gust, every twitch of motion through his scope mattered. The Dominion scouts were rattled but not retreating. That he expected. Arrogance had weight in their hierarchy. It crushed logic beneath tradition. They wouldn't call for reinforcements over a single human. Not yet. From his new perch between 2 sand-worn slabs of ancient concrete, Rook observed them. 5 scouts remained. One was wounded, limping, shield sparking erratically. The others moved in broken patterns. No longer a unit, but a set of nervous individuals pretending cohesion. They pointed in every direction but the right one. The scout who had tried to launch the drone now clutched a sidearm awkwardly, as if it were foreign to his anatomy. Rook adjusted the scope's parallax. The movement helped him refocus, not just visually, but mentally. He needed to stay ahead of their thinking, predict their next assumption. They would rationalize the first kill. They had to. Freak occurrence, they'd say. One lucky shot. That was good. That bought time. He let his breathing fall into a rhythmic cadence. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Repeat. Stillness was his strength, and patience his weapon. These weren't lessons taught by the book, they were earned. Through years of field work, through silent crawl spaces in Central Asia, through nights spent submerged in freezing swamp water, heartbeats away from death. The aliens had technology beyond comprehension, but they lacked a critical skill, humility. A small glint flashed near the wrecked scout pod, light reflecting off metal. Rook traced it to a handheld Dominion scanner. One of the scouts was trying to triangulate. The device rotated, sweeping the environment in soft pulses. Primitive by Dominion standards. Likely issued for ceremonial sweeps, not real threat detection. Rook's eye flicked from the scanner to the scout's knee joint. The armor was segmented there, flawed in design for the sake of mobility. Exposed just enough for the right shot. He dialed in windage. Adjusted elevation by half a click. Inhale. The shot cracked, soft, short, surgical. The scout dropped with a howl, leg folding unnaturally beneath him. The scanner bounced once, then rolled toward the sand. Now it was real. Panic rippled through the group. The remaining scouts yelled, their voices overlapping in what seemed like desperation. Their helmets turned toward one another in frantic gestures. They formed a tighter cluster near the pod, backs to each other, rifles raised to the sky and the rocks, scanning everything but the truth. Rook was already moving again. He rolled backward, rifle tight against his chest, crawling across sun-baked stone toward position 3, an elevated cut in the hillside overlooking their only extraction vector. Dominion vessels didn't just pick troops up from any terrain. They needed flat, sterile surfaces. The pod had landed in the only viable one for miles. He slid into the new nest, bracing the rifle between two stones. He had water left. Barely. A few sips. Enough to stretch another day, maybe two if the heat didn't spike. It didn't matter. The mission had shifted. This wasn't just about observation or containment now. This was disruption. He checked his journal. Not a digital pad, too risky, but a folded sheet of weatherproof paper and a stub of graphite. 2 kills. 1 disabled. 3 targets remaining. Rook didn't write their names. He didn't know them. He drew shapes. A broken circle, a jagged triangle, a slash across a square. Symbols only he understood. Silent language. The scouts had stopped moving again. One had placed a hand on the downed comrade, trying to stabilize the bleeding with synthetic coagulant. Rook noted it. There was fear, but also discipline. These weren't rookies. They just weren't used to being hunted. They would adapt, which meant he had to be faster. Another one activated a visor overlay. He saw the flicker of the helmet's lens switch to infrared. Smart, but it wouldn't help. Rook's ghillie mesh was layered with thermal baffling fiber. Even his breath passed through cooled vents. He considered the shot. There was a narrow line of sight through a broken cargo panel. He could see half of the scout's head. Just half. Too risky. Not worth it. He waited. Minutes passed. The heat shimmered harder now, waves rising like spirits from the earth. Rook used the lull to check his rifle. Clean bolt. No carbon buildup. Barrel cool. Scope clear. He tightened the sling. Adjusted the elevation turret again, just to be sure. Then he heard it. A buzz low and steady. Not mechanical. Not electrical. Wings. He rolled slowly, peering to his left. There it was, an indigenous desert fly, roughly the size of a thumb, spiraling toward his water pouch. He let it land, waited for it to settle, then crushed it between 2 fingers without shifting position. He wiped the blood against the inside of his glove. They'd never designed tech to recognize that movement. The scouts, meanwhile, were arguing again, one of them gesturing furiously toward the pod, the other shaking his head. Rook smiled faintly. The first fracture in leadership. If one bolted for help, it would open a shot. If they split up, it would get worse. Then it happened. One broke off. He sprinted, making a low run toward a ridge in the east. Maybe he thought the sniper wouldn't track him. Maybe he was bait. Rook didn't care. He followed the runner's path through the scope. Quick steps, armor clanking, shield flickering under strain. The scout reached the ridge and ducked behind it, out of sight. Rook counted silently. 1, 2, 3. The scout's head rose again. Just a peek. A mistake. The third shot was clean. Instant. No twitch. The body slumped over the ridge, sliding halfway down the slope. The rest of the squad saw it and broke. One dropped his weapon and screamed something unintelligible. Another fired wildly into the hills, shots sparking uselessly against stone. The last one turned and froze, as if finally understanding that he was no longer in control. Rook watched them for several seconds. He didn't shoot. Not yet. He let the moment stretch, allowed them to feel it. Feel the invisible grip around their throats tightening. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a graveyard, and they didn't know where the next marker would rise. He reached for fresh mag, checked the chamber. 3 down, 2 left. The game had changed, and for the first time in decades, the Dominion had no script to follow. Their superiority was unraveling, and Rook, motionless once more beneath the sand, was writing a new one trigger pull at a time. The Dominion didn't wait long to escalate. From his position atop the western bluff, Rook spotted the shimmer of incoming atmospheric entry well before the sound followed. A deep, concussive rumble passed through the sand beneath him as a narrow, angular shadow cut across the clouds. Fast, controlled, surgical. A war walker. Compact, bipedal, armored with phase-resistant plating and equipped with an aerial drone array and plasma-link cannon. It landed 3 kilometers out, kicking up a geyser of dust on impact. The message was clear: no more tolerance, no more ridicule. Rook adjusted his scope and watched the 2 remaining scouts scramble toward the walker's beacon. They were limping, burned, bleeding but alive. The machine's cockpit opened briefly, allowing the wounded to climb inside. He counted 3 additional forms stepping off the walker. Reinforcements, these ones heavier. Their armor bore the insignia of active combat units, not ceremonial detachments. Real soldiers. Finally, they fanned out in a tight wedge, moving with professional precision across the desert. They didn't laugh. They didn't speak. They scanned the terrain in a synchronized sweep, rifles primed and visors aglow. Rook recognized the posture. These weren't scouts. These were killers. The Dominion had stopped underestimating him. He crawled backward from his perch, rifle slung tight against his chest, then turned and low-crawled through a dry wash carved by centuries of wind. He moved slow, deliberate, like oil poured across stone. Every decision mattered now. His next position had to be perfect. They'd expect high ground, open sight lines. He needed misdirection. Position 4 was lower, hidden beneath the shell of a rusted satellite dish half buried in the sand. From here, he had partial elevation and good acoustic insulation. The walker's steps thudded like distant war drums, measured and unhurried. They weren't searching, they were approaching. They believed they had flushed him out. They were wrong. He opened a small pouch and removed a silver disc the size of a coin. Passive thermal emitter. Handmade. He tossed it 30 meters west into a dry bush. The moment it landed, it began to pulse with low-grade heat, just enough to mimic body temperature. A trick. He waited. A drone launched from the walker, buzzing overhead with a quiet, predatory hum. It spiraled, scanning the landscape in tight arcs. Rook remained still, heartbeat low, breath controlled. The drone angled toward the decoy, hovered, then activated its targeting laser. The moment it locked on, Rook fired. The bullet tore through the drone's hull, shredding its propulsion ring. It fell in pieces, sputtering as it crashed beside the decoy. The soldiers reacted instantly. 2 peeled off toward the emitter's signal, rifles up, scanning. The 3rd turned toward the shot's origin, but hesitated, unsure of direction. Good. Rook adjusted, shifted half an inch left. Through the scope, he saw the soldier's head tilt, scanning thermal overlays. Rook took the shot. The Dominion trooper dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. No sound, just dust. The others froze. One raised a curved antenna from his shoulder plate, no doubt broadcasting to the walker. The machine's top turret rotated, slowly at first, then faster, searching for angles, mapping potential trajectories. Rook moved again. Fast now. Not a crawl. An urgent scramble into the base of a collapsed antenna tower. He knocked over a flat rock to expose a buried cache, 2 high-velocity rounds, and a bolt cutter. He loaded one into the chamber, checked the wind, still shifting eastward, and rotated the bipod 20 degrees. The walker began to move, its twin cannons scanning laterally. One blast from those weapons could incinerate a truck. But they weren't meant for precision, they were deterrents. Rook knew it wouldn't risk overfiring. Too much tech on board. Too much pride. That was the weak spot. He aimed lower, not at the guns but at the joints. The walker's left leg was partially exposed during rotation, a flaw in the stabilizer system. Most would never notice. Rook did. He held his breath. The shot rang out and struck true. The leg buckled. A high-pitched screech tore through the air as the walker lurched, spun, and crashed sideways into a ridge. Dust exploded upward. Smoke. Sparks. The impact was seismic. No one moved. Then the soldier with the antenna bolted. Rook expected it. The hierarchy demanded report and recovery. One would always retreat. But he wasn't letting that happen. He reloaded and tracked the fleeing figure through his scope. The target weaved, altered speed, changed vectors erratically. It was a good run. Rook took a beat, lined up the path. Not where the scout was, but where he would be. He fired. The shot split the air. The runner tumbled, arms flailing, before slamming into the sand and skidding to a stop. A plume of red-orange mist trailed behind him. Silence reclaimed the desert. Nothing but the crackle of the damaged walker and the faint hiss of sand shifting under ruined metal. Rook sat back, letting the rifle fall against his chest. Sweat rolled down his temples, his back, soaking into the suit. His hands didn't shake. His breathing was steady. But inside, something was shifting. They had sent more than scouts now. They'd sent machines. Warriors. And he had broken them. He looked down at his rifle. The same bolt-action design they had mocked, enhanced only by patience, not circuitry. He touched the side with gloved fingers, where the etching read, "Let them laugh." They weren't laughing anymore. Rook retrieved a small transmitter from his pack. It was encoded, analog, untraceable. He pressed the button once. A green light blinked, confirming the message. Target group neutralized. Area secure. No further action required. There would be more. Of that he was certain. The Dominion didn't suffer embarrassment quietly. But this wasn't about numbers. It never was. This was about presence. A statement. A ripple through their ranks. One man. One rifle. 6 kills. The scout ship above had stopped broadcasting. He noticed it now. No more data feed. No more signal spike. Just silence. That silence would spread. Rook sipped the last of his water and leaned into the stone for shade. The temperature was dropping with the sun, shadows lengthening like claws across the ground. He closed his eyes for a moment, just one, then opened them again and watched the stars emerge, small points of light, far away but clear. They would come again, bigger this time, but now they'd come differently, and he would be waiting. The Galactic Council convened in a chamber of shadow and light, its ceiling open to the cosmos. Delegates from across the Dominion gathered beneath translucent screens displaying a frozen image, the aftermath of a failed extraction. A shattered war walker, scorched sand, 6 Dominion corpses arranged by precision, not chaos. No thermal burns, no plasma scarring, just clean, kinetic devastation. A single human sniper had written the story, one bullet at a time. They used a bolt-action rifle, one voice muttered. The translation systems stripped it of emotion, but the silence that followed confirmed the impact. Primitive technology. No AI. No autocorrection. Just pressure, gravity, and patience. A high-caste strategos cleared her throat. This was a forward scouting demonstration, designed to test psychological submission, not provoke resistance. And yet, another interrupted. Our most decorated recon team was annihilated. Not evaded, not wounded, eliminated. They turned to the Dominion commander who had authorized the engagement. He said nothing. His mandibles remained clenched, skin around his eyes dull with shame. For the first time in decades, no one was quoting doctrine. They were questioning it. On Earth, Rook sat in the belly of a shuttle, streaking through the upper atmosphere, silent among a crew of 3. The others had barely spoken since they extracted him from the desert. His armor was scorched, face sunburned beneath the grime, and his hands trembled faintly when he thought no one was looking. He cradled the rifle like a fragile animal, thumb brushing along the side where his kill count had been etched in makeshift marks. Short lines, fading in places, but unmistakable. The pilot glanced back. "You good, sir?" Rook didn't answer, not out of rudeness. Words just didn't matter right now. The mission was complete, but the story wasn't over. He was debriefed in a dark room underground, far beneath what was once a satellite control center and now served as a repurposed intelligence bunker. The walls smelled of recycled air and old metal. A dozen analysts watched from behind glass as Rook stood, unflinching, across from a colonel whose uniform bore no insignia. "We didn't expect resistance so early," the colonel admitted. "Thought they'd scout and mock. Maybe push pressure points." "They did," Rook replied. "And they weren't ready when it got real." The colonel nodded once. "The rifle. It worked," Rook said simply. There was no pride in his voice. No victory speech. Just a weight, earned, carried, and absorbed. The colonel gestured to the weapon lying on the table between them. "What should we do with it?" Rook stepped forward and picked it up. He examined the wear near the bolt, the carbon scoring near the muzzle, the tiny crack forming along the foregrip. He handed it back. "Put it somewhere they'll see it," he said. "Not behind glass. Somewhere they'll remember." By the time the report was declassified, partially, strategically, stories had already begun circulating across Earth's resistance enclaves. Whispers of a single operator, a sniper who turned the most advanced army in the galaxy into scattered corpses with an old rifle and iron discipline. A myth, some said. Propaganda, others believed. But the Dominion didn't challenge the narrative. They couldn't. Because for once, the myth was true. Across fringe colonies, where human settlements struggled beneath planetary sanctions and trade blockades, the story lit fires. Militia leaders quoted him. Civilians painted his rifle on walls beside the word "wait." Kids played games where one of them lay prone, pretending to line up the shot that would change everything. Meanwhile, in Dominion space, silence spread like infection. Ship captains began requesting extra clearance when entering Earth-aligned sectors. Low-ranking officers avoided ground deployments on blue-tag planets, those where humans had military history. The words "kinetic kill" appeared in training manuals, usually accompanied by uneasy explanations and footage that no longer included the original mocking commentary. The rifle itself was mounted not in a museum, but in a war school, a glass case at the entrance, its barrel slightly pitted, its wooden grip worn smooth. Above it, a plaque read, "Galactic scouts laughed at Earth's rifles," until the sniper pulled the trigger. It wasn't a slogan. It was a warning. Rook never returned to frontline service. He disappeared into the system the way old soldiers do, quietly, without fanfare. Some said he trained others in secret. Others believed he went back to the desert, waiting for the Dominion to make the same mistake twice. The truth didn't matter. The effect did. Years later, a Dominion recruit, young, curious, and overly confident, would come across the footage in a secure simulation chamber. He'd watch the thermal scans of the fallen scouts, the trajectory paths of the bullets, the precise mathematical silence of the kills. That was just one. He'd ask. The instructor, older, eyes heavy with knowledge, would nod. Just one. The recruit would pause. Then why didn't we destroy them after? The instructor's gaze would drift toward the black and white photo tacked above the screen. A lone figure, prone in sand, rifle aimed into the void. No armor, no drones, just breath and focus. Because they didn't care what we thought about their weapons, he said. They cared what we feared. The simulation ended with a flicker. The recruit stood silently. Back on Earth, somewhere in the highlands where the signal couldn't reach, a man sat on a ridge beneath a silent sky. No rank, no name badge. Just an old rifle across his knees and a notebook in his lap. He drew a single line, then another. Quiet marks for quiet victories. And far above, beyond the reach of any bullet, the stars continued watching.